Welcome to this Explainer. Today we're unpacking 3 absolutely harrowing first-person accounts sourced straight from the Mr. Nightmare archives. We're going to look really deeply at survival psychology. Specifically, what actually happens when we leave our well-lit, comfortable worlds, take one wrong turn, and suddenly stumble into a countryside nightmare. It is literally a terrifying masterclass in recognizing when normalcy ends and a very real fight for your life begins.
So what happens when the peaceful American countryside actually becomes a trap? You know, a lot of us instinctively associate rural roads, empty farmland, and abandoned barns with peace and quiet. It's the ultimate escape from the city, right? But let me tell you, when you are miles away from civilization, that physical isolation quickly transforms into a profound psychological vulnerability. The deeper you go into those unlit backroads, the more the silence stops being relaxing and starts becoming a deeply unpredictable threat.
You never know what people are capable of, especially when no one's around to witness. That chilling realization comes right from one of the survivors in our source material. And it's just a stark, terrifying reminder that the invisible social contract we rely on every single day, the expectation that people are just going to behave normally, can completely evaporate the exact moment there are no witnesses around to enforce it. When the streetlights vanish, the rules change entirely.
All right, let's dive into Rule 1. Never get lost. We're looking at navigational vulnerability and the comedian's mistake. 5 hours. Think about that for a second. That is how far this young, struggling comedian drove across state lines into unfamiliar, endless farmland just for a chance at a $1,000 prize. As the daylight faded and his radio signals just turned to dead static, he drove deeper and deeper into the middle of nowhere. By making this massive trek entirely alone, without any reliable support system or an intimate knowledge of the terrain, he effectively severed his ties to safety before the sun even began to set. The trap kind of closed around him slowly, methodically, and relentlessly. It started innocently enough at 4 p.m. with a missed turn on a dirt road. By 5 o'clock, he had an incredibly unsettling encounter with a group of dead-eyed locals at this rundown rural gas station. And then, at dusk, the final devastating blow hits. Both of his front tires were completely obliterated by deliberately placed roofing nails. He was completely stranded, and night was falling fast.
It's wild how a series of seemingly mundane, logistical mistakes can just compound, leaving you utterly defenseless. I mean, he trusted these unverified printed MapQuest directions that led him straight into a maze of dirt roads. He was relying on a massive 1980-style brick phone that couldn't pull a single bar of service. And honestly, worst of all, driving an uninspected, uninsured car made him actively hesitant to call the cops for help. He literally feared a ticket or impoundment more than he initially feared the dark. Those everyday oversights left him as a total sitting duck.
Now, the sheer lack of a traditional motive here, that makes what happened next profoundly terrifying. The men who eventually boxed his crippled car in with the beat-up pickup truck weren't asking for his wallet. They communicated only in guttural grunts, aggressively ripped at his locked door handles, and then suddenly erupted into top of their lungs howling right into the night. Logic was completely off the table at this point. His only choice was explosive physical action, shoving his door open to knock one backward, diving headfirst into the pitch-black woods, and laying completely flat in the brush with his heart pounding as they actively hunted him in the dark. Moving on to Rule 2. Do not trespass. This is all about the dangers of the abandoned farmhouse. You can literally see how a sense of youthful adventure just warped into an absolute nightmare. At 4:30 p.m., these friends on a cross-country trip discovered a heavily overgrown barn, and they were fully convinced it had been abandoned for years. Fueled by the excitement of their road trip and the thrill of the unknown, they just lost track of time. By 9 p.m., they made a fateful, hubristic decision to roll out their sleeping bags and camp inside the attached farmhouse. What began as harmless daytime exploration shifted seamlessly into a midnight trap. 3 a.m. I mean, that is literally the absolute worst time to be jolted awake in a place you know you don't belong. First came this faint shush sound echoing in the pitch-black hallway. Then a violent rattling bang on the broken wooden door they'd hastily propped up for protection. And finally, the most unsettling, skin-crawling detail of all. Soft, delicate taps coming from the glass window on the complete opposite side of the room. They were completely surrounded in the dark. When these 3 painfully skinny strangers finally shoved the door open, the attack wasn't actually physical at first. Instead, it was an exercise in pure psychological warfare. When one of the girls started screaming in pure visceral terror, one of the male intruders just stared at her with dead eyes and started screaming back, perfectly mirroring her panic at the exact same volume. It's a predatory tactic that completely bypasses human reason and psychologically paralyzes the victim right in their tracks. And then it gets weirder. The intruders casually put on these inexplicable makeshift masks right in front of the terrified girls. One placed a giant purple cube over his head, another donned a crudely cut cardboard Batman mask. And the woman? She strapped on a medical mask decorated with plastic, sharp holiday icicles protruding like tusks. It was absolutely surreal. The sheer, bizarre unpredictability of this threat proved in an instant that logic wasn't going to save them. You absolutely cannot negotiate with madness. So how do you get out of that? Only through an immediate, panicked sequence of kinetic, physical action. That's the only thing that allowed the women to escape the farmhouse with their lives. As the masked intruders closed in, the narrator violently shoved the skinny woman to the dusty floorboards. Her friend instantly deployed pepper spray right into the confined room, creating a blinding split second of chaos. Even as the woman on the floor lunged and grabbed her ankle with an iron grip, she kicked free, and the girls just ran blindly through the weeds to their SUV, speeding off into the night without ever looking back. Okay, let's look at Rule 3. Beware false security, the illusion of safety and isolation. This story has a really horrific juxtaposition between what we expect to fear and what actually hurts us. On a deeply romantic, isolated wilderness trip intended for a marriage proposal, the narrator's new fiancé was terrified of a natural threat, wild bears. She was a notoriously light sleeper because of it, constantly listening to the rustling leaves outside. But the actual threat wasn't an animal at all. It was a deeply personal, highly motivated, and utterly human predator lurking just inches outside their locked truck bed.
The warning signs here were subtle, sure, but so deeply invasive. The night before the attack, the fiancé heard heavy footsteps and low mumbling circling in the dark. The next morning, they found a small, unexplainable, human-sized footprint pressed into the dirt near the tires. And most chillingly, the narrator's meticulously written trip planner book was mysteriously left wide open in the back seat of his supposedly locked truck cab. The stalker was actively toying with them, invading their most private space, and tracking their movements in total silence.
Don't make a sound, someone is outside the truck. I'll distract them, take the keys, start the truck, and I'll jump back in. The narrator actually typed this exact note on his glowing phone screen and handed it to his sleeping fiancé once he spotted a hooded figure pacing ominously outside the glass. He didn't dare speak. It was an absolute masterclass in survival communication. In the dead of night, in the middle of a forest, making a single verbal sound could have triggered a fatal, immediate ambush from whoever was waiting out there in the dark. 6 years. Let that sink in. 6 whole years. After the narrator threw open the truck cap to distract the intruder, his ankle was brutally and instantly smashed with a thick tree branch. But during the chaotic, violent struggle in the dirt, the attacker's hood fell back. And you know who it was? It was his ex-girlfriend. She had nurtured a deeply unhinged, silent grudge for 6 entire years, meticulously tracking him down, just waiting for the perfect moment to ambush him in the middle of absolutely nowhere with a large kitchen knife. All right, bringing it all together, surviving the unthinkable, deconstructing the nightmare. So what are the takeaways? Survival in these extreme, unpredictable environments really comes down to a few very harsh core truths. First, physical isolation doesn't just add a little bit of danger to a situation. It amplifies your vulnerability exponentially by removing any chance of outside rescue. Second, bizarre erratic behavior, like howling at the moon or throwing on a purple cube mask, is a massive flashing red flag that you absolutely cannot reason your way out of the situation. And in every single one of these accounts, survival didn't come from hiding. It relied on trusting an immediate gut feeling and choosing explosive, forceful physical action over freezing up in terror. I'm gonna leave you with this final thought to ponder. The next time you take a long road trip to just get away from it all, and your GPS suddenly loses its signal on a pitch black, completely empty back road, will you ever be able to look at the silence the exact same way again? Keep your eyes wide open, trust those gut instincts, and above all else, stay safe out there.